Yeah, it's interesting too to have, those two different perspectives because Apple, while it is this beacon of creativity, ultimately what you're building there is corporate video, right? I mean, Apple does it better than everyone else. What was really eye-opening is that when you go from that corporate video infrastructure to a YouTube video infrastructure, it's totally different. Totally different. And even, like, being a producer there and, like, going to the creative director at Mark Rober and being like, "Hey, this guy that I worked with at Apple is, like, one of the best editors I've ever worked with." And, like, having him do an edit test for Mark Rober's creative director, and then Mark Rober's creative director's like, "Yeah, this guy's too corporate." I'm like, "What are you talking about? This is, like, the best editor I've ever worked with." But it's like, that's a very specific thing to do YouTube. It's almost a completely different style of editing where, especially in the YouTube world, if you look at like Mr. Beast, Mark Rober, some of those people at the top of the food chain in that space, and you look at how their videos are edited, they're breaking the rules of traditional video, but it works on YouTube. So it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic for sure.
Welcome, everybody, back to the Full Battery Media Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Trace, and I was frozen there for a second, but I've got an awesome guest with me today. Would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, my name is Matt Searle. Right now, I'm the head of product for a company called Open Sesame. We build audio collaboration software. Yeah, and I have a kind of a vast experience in the music business and education and, working in big tech. So yeah, glad to be here.
That's awesome, man. You've done a lot of cool stuff. Like, that was one of the things when I look for guests and I try to find people that have interesting backgrounds. And like yours is super interesting. You've got a lot of cool stuff you've done. And I like that because to me, it's like, I love people that have like learned experience, man, lived experience. And it's just cool stuff that they're able to share with the world in general. And I wanted to ask
Yeah.
you this because how did you get started in this path? How did you get going?
Yeah. I mean, I went to Full Sail, which a lot of people go to that school. I specifically went to study audio recording. So, that was what I kind of always knew I wanted to do. I had an interesting upbringing because I grew up in Southeast Idaho. So, if you know local news markets, Southeast Idaho is market 156 of like, I don't remember, I think it's like 165 or something like that. It's one of the
Wow.
smallest markets in the United States. So they literally hire high schoolers to run their broadcasts. So when I was 17,
That's
I started working at the local TV station doing news. And I got the opportunity as a 17-year-old to run audio for the local news broadcast. So
Oh,
live to
wow.
air, 17-year-old running the audio board, right? Um, so having that pressure of working in live, realizing that I'm pretty good at it. And so I kind of knew what I wanted to do from a really early age. And then as I started exploring colleges, going to a local college where, I knew I wanted to study audio, there's no audio program there. So then I sought out Full Sail, went there, and, met some people while I was there. There was like, yeah, you just moved to LA. Like you'll figure it out. So I did. Right out of college, I moved to LA, got a job at a record label, was the studio manager and label coordinator for a small indie record label for about 5 years. Really enjoyed that. Really had a great time. Learned a lot about audio recording because that was kind of my specialty at the label. And
Nice.
then ended up getting a job as, the staff audio engineer at a fairly large university back where I'm from in Southeast Idaho, which had like a 3-room, multi-million-dollar recording studio. So for 7 years, I ran that, mentored students, which was a really cool experience. And then out of that, I had the opportunity to start doing some freelance work for Apple, which eventually led to them hiring me full time. So I moved here to Austin, Texas. Have been here ever since. Worked for Apple for almost 8 years. And then now I'm head of product for a tech startup called Open Sesame. And while I've been head of product, we're building a startup. So I still was doing some freelance had the opportunity to work for Mark Rober and Crunch Labs for the last year. I actually just left Mark Rober and Crunch Labs because the things with the startup are we just had an activation and kind of launched our product, exited stealth mode at South by Southwest this year. So it's time for me to jump in with both feet to the startup. But the year at Crunch Labs was awesome. Yeah.
I can only imagine how much fun that must be working at Crunch Labs. You know, it's like you're around people that are just doing some of the most creative stuff out there. And that's just awesome, man. But I want to ask you this too, because like, you know, you've seen it and you've worked at places like Apple and with creators like Mark Rober. What did you learn about what actually makes content and media work while you were there?
Yeah, it's interesting too to have, to have those two different perspectives because Apple, while it is this beacon of creativity, ultimately what you're building there is corporate video, right? I mean, Apple does
Right.
it better than everyone else. What was really eye opening is that when you go from that corporate video infrastructure to a YouTube video infrastructure, it's totally different. Totally
Yeah.
different. And even, like, being a producer there and, like, going to the creative director at Mark Rober and being like, "Hey, like, this guy that I worked with at Apple is, like, one of the best editors I've ever worked with." And, like, having him do an edit test for Mark Rober's creative director, and then Mark Rober's creative director's like, "Yeah, this guy's too corporate." I'm like, "What are you talking about? This is, like, the best editor I've ever worked with." But it's like, that's a very specific thing to do YouTube. It's almost a completely different style of editing where especially in the YouTube world, if you look at like Mr. Beast, Mark Rober, some of those people at the top of the food chain in that space, and you look at how their
Yeah.
videos are edited, they're breaking the rules of traditional
Yes.
video, but it works on YouTube. So it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic for sure.
It is interesting. And it's like because one of the things I think people don't realize is that in traditional media, you go through the cycles and you're taught the ways things work. You're shown how to do it. And like, this is the right way. This is the way. This is the way it's always been done. I remember this one story about this kid that my friend taught him guitar. And the kid had never had a guitar lesson in his life.
Mhm.
He just had been given a guitar when he was a kid, picked it up, and jammed with different music. He figured out things. He got a chord book somewhere, and yet he became this absolutely amazing guitarist. And when my friend went to teach him, he said to me, he's like, he does everything wrong. And I said, so what's the problem? You know, it's easy to fix. He's like, no, I don't want to fix it because it's so amazing how he plays. Like I'm sitting there and they're like, everyone's like, you need to fix his technique. And I'm like, his technique is something that's completely different, but it's amazing, you know? And I think that's one of the things that we're seeing with the media right now. People are just, they grew up with, for young musicians, growing up with a DAW and some, different tools they had, and they're making amazing music. The same thing for video people. They're just like, hey, I've got this iPhone, let's do this. And people are like, you're not supposed to do that. And they're like, I just did. Damn, I just had
Yeah.
20 million views. Should I fix it? They're like, well, I don't know. I don't know if you should fix it, because it seems to be working.
Well, and there's like the joke, right? Like us coming up in the media, like people that are, I'm in my mid 40s, right? Like people my age, you have the joke of like when you learn to edit, right? And in the 60s, it's like I had a friend that worked at a TV station. And then like in the 80s, like my high school had two VHS decks that we could use to edit with. And then the 90s is like, oh yeah, we had a Macintosh in my lab that had Final Cut on it. And then like the mid 2000s, it's like, oh yeah, I got a computer that came with the, iMovie. And then like now today, it's like in the back of my car on the way home from daycare on an iPad, like is when I learned to edit. It's just like it's so different the world we live in. My son, who's a music producer, he's 16. He's been producing music in Logic Pro and Ableton since he was 8 years old, right? Like it's
Yep.
just like a completely different world that they're growing up in. And now now this Gen Alpha, Gen Z, like they're the people on YouTube making content that the world is watching
Mhm.
and younger millennials as well, right? Like, it's interesting what they've come up with, and it's all entertaining, right? The Sopranos is entertaining, and so is Mr. Beast's last video. Like, it's just a different style,
Yep.
and this is entertainment for the next generation, and it's still good. It's not bad. It's good.
Yep. It's interesting that the medium changes, but storytelling's still the same. But we have tools that are making storytelling easier. And that's the thing. The other day, someone I got into this debate with people about new tools, and I'm not going to go on the whole AI thing. Like, dude, we've had tools that have been advancements throughout time memorial. It's like there's always been a new tool, and people are like, "What is this new thing that we are?" So frustrated. But like at the end of the day, whether it was cave painting, moving into narrative storytelling, like word of mouth, like you think about that, like the Iliad and the Odyssey, some of the greatest works and were stories that were just passed down. It was a narrative,
Yep.
it's like the storytelling structure, and then humans learned to write. It's like you get a way to level it up right there. But like one of the things too is I think that we're just story is still story, and I think that as long as people are tying into great stories, great arcs, whether it be a musical arc, what is the story you're telling with your music? It's going to be good, as long as you anchor into that.
Yeah. Well, and not to completely dive into AI, but I went to a panel at NAMM this year, where a bunch of people from Universal Music were there, and the two studio managers for East West Studios and Capitol Records Studios, which are two of the most iconic studios in the world, they were talking about, hey, people are saying AI is going to kill recording studios, and they're like, yeah, they said the same thing about ADAT, and they said the same thing about Reverb, and they said the same thing about Pro Tools, and here I am, I still have a job. And it's
Yep.
like, yeah, it might change things. It might make things a little bit different. But if you look at the photography industry, people said that Photoshop was going to kill photography. Photoshop created jobs. It didn't
Yep.
take away jobs, it created jobs.
My wife is a singer, and we've been integrating AI into our workflow. And it's been
Yeah.
really cool because what we do is we have a human songwriter. But then when we would send like demos to people, we're like, hey, we want the demo to sound like this. And my wife has to then describe inspiration, right? And she's like, this, and I need this and this. And then if we come back and like, she's like, I want a cinematic movie piece. And the guy's like, here's your dubstep. And I was like, no, that's not what I was looking for. And I mean, that actually
Right.
happened 2 weeks ago. I sent this guy the cinematic piece and like, or a month ago, he sent me back some dubstep stuff. I was like, not what we're looking for. I mean, it's cool, but not what we're looking for. So she's taking
Right.
AI music generation, throwing the song from the songwriter in there, saying, I want it this like this, and then we're pulling out the demo that's just awesome at that point, sending it to Real Music, like our music producer, having him get human instruments going back in, and it's just such a cool way to like. It's a tool, man. That's like how you
Yeah.
use it. So
100%. We've had audio processing, all sorts of different things that have used machine learning that have been
yep.
used as tools in the music business for years, and no one complained about it. I think the biggest thing you have is there's the reality, right? That we want machines to like do our laundry and do the dishes so that we can make art, right? We don't want machines to make art. And so I
Yeah.
think that that's what some of the backlash is. And I think the reality is like a completely AI generated song, an artist that has the skills to write a song is never going to use that because they have the skills to
Yep.
write a song.
Hundred
What it
percent.
democratizes is someone who has an idea but does not have the skills to write a song can now use AI to write that song. And that's not necessarily a bad thing as long as, we're not platforming slop. Which,
100%. That's There's a difference, and this is what I've been talking to people like I hate AI generated videos, and I'm not trying to go down
right,
AI rabbit
right.
hole, but I can't stand them, right? But the
Yeah.
AI tools that my team uses to help us edit and speed up our processes are great. I saw this one guitarist that maybe that guitarist is a solid guitarist, and they don't have the money to get drums, a drummer and a bassist and a thing, and they want to create their own thing, and then they can generate some of those other things. I mean, it's great. auto tune didn't kill music when it came along. I mean, it did some interesting
Auto-tune's a
stuff.
tool.
It's a
Auto-tune's a
tool.
tool. Yeah.
Exactly. It was a tool. And I mean, and people were like, oh, it's going to destroy music. Dude, jazz is still jazz. Great musicians are still great musicians, and
Yep.
like at the end of the day, if you can give some kid in whereverville the chance to get their music out there and to,
Yeah.
to be seen, more power to you. But I wanted to ask you this next question because a lot of people, though, like some people don't even get to that point. Like a lot of people want to create content but never start. And like, why do you think that might be?
I mean, I think when it comes down to it, like I have, I have younger kids and I have older kids. And what's interesting is my younger kids want to be YouTubers and my older kids have already given up on that dream. And I think what happens is
Mm,
somewhere along the line, people realize how much work it is. I mean,
yeah.
I don't think anyone fully understands, and I do, what it takes to make a Mark Rober video. I
Yeah.
don't think anyone has
It's
any
hard
clue
work.
how much work it is to do that. I was pretty heavily involved in the Alcatraz and Goalie Robot post production videos that Mark did last year. And I mean, my time cards were extensive, and I'm just one piece of the puzzle, right? There's probably 50 or 60 people working on those videos at the end of the day. And it's so much work. But it's also an interesting thing when it comes to how Mark does things, is that everybody's on board because there is a creative vision and everybody's behind the creative vision. So it also becomes fun. So I think what happens is a lot of people stop before they get to the fun part. They see the roadblocks in their way and they're like, I don't want to go through these roadblocks. But once you get past those roadblocks, like I look at my experience on those two specific videos and how much hard work it was. And I don't look back on it like it was a chore. I look back on it like it was fun. But I did work really hard. So I think that's what stops a lot of people is it takes a lot to create good art. And especially with today's tools, you can get 40% of the way there, 50% of the way there really fast to creating something great. But to get to that 80%, that 100%, especially to get, that the theory of that last 20% is the hardest. We've all
Yeah.
heard that. It takes a lot of work. And I think sometimes people s- just see the hard work of it and don't see the fun of it. And so they miss out, right?
I 100% agree. And I think that sometimes people, I love that you're saying what you're saying about the hard work because, like, doing this for so long, I've seen a lot of different creators and different channels that my team's worked with. And it is not easy. It is not simple. It is not
Mhm.
let's go and just knock this out in 2 hours type of a thing. No, it's like months of planning for some of these videos and to put these things into place. Um,
Right.
it is really a challenge. And I think that one of the things that people do is like what I would say though is start small. I think that that's what I would tell people is like, if you want to get out there and you have a reason that you want to be doing this, maybe it's to help build your business. Maybe you want to get more visibility for some reason. You want to do TED Talks. Okay, cool. Don't aim to do a TED Talk every day. Instead of sit there and go, I'm going to record one 90-second reel and put that out there and see what it looks like. And if you can start with that, it will get you closer. It will get you on the right path. And it's like, but I want to ask you this too, because like, what's something people think they need to get started, but like actually don't?
Oh, oh, the audio industry is the most guilty of this, but the video industry too, is that you need to have certain tools. A lot of people
Yeah.
think that you need to have certain tools. I've dealt with this with my son, where it's like, oh, I need to have this plugin because this is what all the producers that I like use. And it's like, well, the reality is you have this plugin that does the same thing. You just
Hmm.
want this other tool because it's what the people that you're idolizing are using. And it's interesting because into especially in today's world, yes, software, yes, computers cost money, but the reality is the majority, especially in the United States of America, we're such an affluent society. The majority of people have no barrier to entry to make creative work. And
100%.
that's a reality that a lot of people would disagree with. But the truth is, you have more power on your cell phone than the supercomputers that existed when, I was coming up in the industry. And so and GarageBand's free if you have an iPhone. And there's, FL Studio and other tools. Ableton has a free version, Pro Tools has a free version. DaVinci is free for everybody and does all of these things, including editing and correction. And so the reality is there is no barrier of entry anymore. So I get this question a lot, especially like, I try to do as much mentoring with, alumni from schools I went to and anyone in the industry that wants to learn more. And I always get this question. I always just say, go and create art, especially like if they're a student, like go find your tribe, go find the students at your university that are doing what you want to do and go make art with them. Like go find other
100%.
people that want to do this, even if you're not a student, even if you're adult in their mid 40s and want to break into this industry, find a 24-hour film festival and enter it, right? Like there's all these opportunities to do creative work and there is no barrier of entry anymore. Like just go and do.
I
That
100% agree, man.
one thing that I tell people a lot is if you look at Billie Eilish and Phineas, they
Yeah,
swept the Grammys from their parents' the second bedroom in their parents' house. They swept the Grammys from the second bedroom in their parents' house. He has Yamaha HS8s as speakers, which are like $600 speakers when they made that record that swept the Grammys. They're using a UAD Apollo and Apple Logic Pro. These are all tools that you can go to a Guitar Center and buy today. They didn't have
right.
anything. They didn't have anything extra to make them great. Just their talent. That's it.
I remember reading that I think one of Billie Eilish's like albums was done on like $100 mic too. Like,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They didn't. I mean, her parents worked in the like her mom kind of famously is in the video game Mass Effect. Like her parents worked in the industry, but they were not rich. They did
yeah,
not have a bunch of money. Like they were just average middle class people living in LA. So yeah, they came from very humble beginnings. Very famously, Skrillex, his EP that won him his first Grammys, the tweeter
yeah.
in his left, I think it was his left speaker, the tweeter didn't work. He was using broken speakers and made an EP that won a Grammy and literally changed music. Like if you think,
That's
I don't know if
awesome.
you know Skrillex, but like he
Yeah,
literally changed music
yeah. That's
with a
rad, man. I
broken
didn't know
speaker.
about the speaker. I didn't know about the broken speaker. Like, that's wild. That's absolutely wild. Well, I'm just like, excited to like ask you this next question then, because like that just gets me inspired, man. But you've worked on some high level productions. What's the difference between something that's good and something that people actually care about? How do you make something that people remember?
Dude, that's a great question. I think it really comes down to, curation and care and taste. Because when you care, and when the people that you're filming or the people that are making what you're making care, that comes across on camera or that comes across through the speakers. And when they don't, people can tell. If it
Hmm.
isn't, if you're making something and it isn't genuine, people will see through it immediately. And so I think you have to care. We kind of talked about the juxtaposition between Mark Rober and what we did at Apple. I think what Apple is really good at, especially where I came from, because I worked in sales. So, at the end of the day, if you think about what we were doing, is we were making sales training videos for Best Buy employees, right? Like that was my job. We could have done that the most boring way. Here's the new iPhone. Here's all the features. But we never did that because it was Apple. We always found a way to tell the story in a way that would relate to the people that we were making those videos for. So one of my favorite projects I did at Apple is we did, um, once again, this is all training videos for Best Buy, Target, Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T employees,
Uh-huh.
right? And we went to LA, Washington, DC, and New York, and we filmed with a photographer, a painter, and a music artist, and just showed how they use Apple products to make their art. And those were the videos that we made for sales training. And it was genuine because the artists that we were working with were stoked to be working with us. They were stoked to be making a project for Apple. They were really responsive to like what we were doing, and they were excited because all three of them legitimately used Apple products to make their art. It wasn't fake, it was real. And so it was genuine. It came across as like, this is my process, and this is how I use these tools that Apple make to make my process easier. And those videos
Uh-huh.
are super entertaining, they're super engaging, and they were highly successful because it was genuine. And yeah, of
Uh-huh.
course, the filming was impeccable because we hired amazing crews, and the audio sounded incredible because we have amazing people on our team. And technically they were perfect, but what that's not what made them good. What made them good is they were genuine.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's the genuine nature that like is awesome for me because it's like we can at the end of the day sit there and try to match what other people are doing, or we can make something that actually works according to
Yeah,
our vibe, according to
yeah.
our creativity, our whatever it might be, you know? And I wanted to ask you this too, because I'm curious in how you think about this, but like when you're building something creative, how do you know it's worth sticking with it or if you should move on? Like, are you, like should you go and push as hard as you can on that thing that is the thing that you believe in? Or should you just say, hey, this isn't working. Let's figure out another angle.
I think this goes back to Mark Rober because he really is great at this. No, I think it goes back to Mark Rober. If you watch a lot of his videos, he bakes failure into the video.
Mm.
Um, like his egg drop from space video, very famously, like he failed at that multiple times. Like that video should have been a disaster, but he didn't. He made it a good video because he baked failure into the video. So I think a lot of times, yeah, and sometimes, you'll fail. There's projects that Mark started and never finished. There's plenty of projects, at Apple that we started on and never finished. There's plenty of projects at Apple because Apple's such a big corporation where we finished the video and no one's seen it because Apple legal told us we couldn't use it or something in the video didn't work out and we didn't get proper permission or something like that. Um, but I think the biggest thing that you have to take away is, yeah, sometimes something doesn't work out. And, you know, I think your taste ultimately guides whether or not you continue on something. But I think the biggest thing to take away in those situations is that you learn from those failures, that you learn and grow and take what you learned into the next project, or even take what you learned into that project, and finish it, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can fail and still finish a project, right? It doesn't mean that failure doesn't have to be the end of something, but,
Yeah.
I think Mark's great at that, and if you're a big, watcher of his catalog, there there's he'll tell you. It was like, "This is what I intended to film, it didn't work out, but here's what I'm gonna do to fix it," right? Like, I don't know that there's very many creators that do that as openly as Mark does.
Right? He's so good at that. Like you'll head in and he'll be like, "Hey, this is what I thought I was gonna do." Um, but like that's the reality. Like I don't think people realize how many times things don't go the way you're anticipating. And at that point in time, you have to improvise. And if you can, it makes it much easier to not go down on go down with the ship when things start going the wrong direction, because they
Mhm.
often do. But like leads me to the next question because a lot of people struggle with consistency. It's hard to keep
Mm.
showing up. How do you keep showing up and creating even when you're not feeling it? Because when things don't go the way you want, it's hard to keep it up.
I think there's 2 things there. I think one, you know, you have to find your why when it comes to creativity. And so
Okay.
once you do that, it makes it easier to show up on the days where, you're not feeling it. And then 2, like, I think we have to realize that, like, it's okay to be mediocre sometimes.
Hmm.
Not every Mark Rober video has 200 million views. Not every Apple commercial is a slam. Not every Apple product is a slam. I mean, Apple has famous failures, as a company. Just recently, I saw an interview with Greg, one of the leaders at Apple, talking about Apple Maps and how much of a failure Apple Maps was. But now Apple Maps is on par, and some people would even argue is better than Google Maps. They
Yeah.
they learn from failure. So I think, like, finding your why, and then you know realizing that, one, it's okay to fail, and one, it's okay to, like, do something mediocre. Not everything you make is going to be great. And I think going into it knowing that, it actually helps mentally, but then it also, like, keeps you striving for that greatness, right? Like, if you're not putting that pressure on yourself, because I think that's what happens to a lot of creators. And I think that's what happens, especially if you look in music and film, any high-end entertainment, video games are famous for burnout culture, right? And
Yeah.
I think that, um, in all of those spaces, having a mental attitude that you're not, finding ways to not put pressure on yourself is is so important, because you will burn out, because
Yeah.
creativity is so fun. This industry is so fun, you will burn yourself out. It's
Right.
just a reality. It's
It
just
is
a
a
reality
reality.
to face. And so you have to find, even if you have to put in guardrails for yourself, you have to find ways to be mentally healthy in that creative space. Um, and I think, it's interesting, because I've had to work with a lot of different types of creators, and some just show up every day and they're ready to go. And I work with the art director at Apple, and the first few years I worked with him, I did not appreciate him as an artist,
Mm.
just because I didn't understand. But then once I understood, because I worked with him as an audio engineer, and then I worked with him as a producer. And as an audio engineer, I was very frustrated with his process. But then as a producer, I got to learn to understand it, because he's one of those people that's like, my coworkers, we would say he needs to go in his creative cave for a while and figure this out. And so, to me, we were wasting time. Why are we in our creative cave figuring this out? Like, why are we taking so long to make these decisions? But then, like, as being his producer, and then seeing, like, once he comes out of the cave, his ideas are so much more brilliant than anyone else's. And, like, letting his process play out, it's like, oh, we're so much farther ahead now than we would have been by giving him his space to go in his cave. So I think there's internally, we have to figure out what we need to do for ourselves to be mentally healthy. And then externally, you know, you have to realize, especially as you become a creative leader, that not everybody's creative the same, and that you need to be flexible and malleable to other people's creative processes, so that they can be mentally healthy when they show up. So that's something that I learned huge at Apple. And I made mistakes because I was trying to force people into my creative process, and it didn't work for them. And and I had to learn, hey, no, I need to manage this person differently than I manage this person, right? Like,
100%. And you have to manage expectations, man. You have to know what you're getting into and be able to set yourself up for success. Because if you're trying to pull off things that are absolutely outside of the scope of what you're able to, it's going to lead to burnout, you know? And one
Yeah.
mistake that I see creators making over and over again is for myself, I see people trying to do too much,
Yeah.
trying to do too much and not setting up reasonable expectations. Because if your expectations are not reasonable, it is not going to be something that you can succeed at. And I think that that's where it is for me. Like I try to tell people, um, that's a thing that you got to be careful of. And I want to ask you, what's one mistake you see creators making over and over again?
Um, I think it goes back to, what we talked about earlier is, and you just mentioned it, is, improper expectations. And, mm, and yeah, it's so hard to balance life, right?
Yeah.
Because for the majority of people, creativity is an outlet, it's a therapy, it's something they do for fun. When it
Yeah.
becomes your job, then it's so hard to have that balance. So, one, I
Yep.
think a lot of people make the mistake of, we just mentioned it, overwork. And then I think a lot of people, I th- this is this is going to come across as, I don't know, maybe soft, but I think a lot of people in the creative industry are too hard on themselves.
Mm,
I think that I think that we put a pressure bec- because if you think about our society, the pedestal that we've put like film, TV, video games, music on, where these are now highly profitable industries. Whereas, like um most painters, right? Like Van Gogh, he was never famous while he was alive, right? Like
right?
being an artist was not a profitable industry for the majority of human society, whereas now it is.
Yeah.
And because of that, a lot of people put a pressure on themselves to be, something that quite frankly they may never ever be. But, if you look at the past, that's not why people made art. Um, and so I think to land the plane on this question, to give you, something you can use, because I've kind of been rambling. But I think that a lot of times, art, it becomes a highly pressurized uh, industry. And I think that if you're going into art to make money, any creative endeavor to make money, you're doing it wrong.
Right?
Like if you happen to end up making money by doing your creativity, then that's great. You won the lottery. But the reality is if you're going into it to make money, you have the wrong attitude. And that's something that's really hard to grasp and really hard to balance. And so I think with that perspective in mind, you know, there's I tell just to kind of give you an example of this. Um, I live in Austin, Texas, and Austin's known as one of the most famous music cities in the world, right? But
Yeah.
yet, what musicians do you know that come from Austin? There's a few. There's a few. You got Gary Clark Jr., you got the Black Pumas right now. You've got Stevie Ray Vaughan, Willie
I was
Nelson,
gonna
very
say
famous.
Stevie Ray Vaughan, though. That was the one that
Yeah.
I was thinking of.
But it's not like Seattle. It's not
Yeah.
like New York or LA. It's definitely not like Nashville, right? And so, like, why is that? And the reality is, you have an artist middle class in Austin that
Mm,
kind of doesn't exist anywhere else, where you can
mm,
have a band that plays Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, El Paso, Lubbock, maybe Oklahoma City, rinse, repeat, and make money. And everybody's
mhm,
making a living. They're paying their bills. but no one outside of Texas knows who these bands are.
Yeah.
And that regional music scene still exists in Texas in a way that it doesn't exist in other economies. And so I think if you're going into music to be Pearl Jam or to be Bon Jovi or to be right whatever, then you're doing it wrong. If you're going, hey, if I can make enough money to pay the bills and I can make my living doing music, I've won. And that's your attitude, then you're doing it right.
Yeah. I love that, man. And I think it pushes it back into the art. But I wanted to ask one last question. If someone's listening and wants to start creating something, what's the first step they should take today?
Yeah, I think learn the tools. I mean, there's plenty of colleges you can go to learn all these skills. There's plenty of opportunity to learn them on your own. We've talked a lot about YouTube today. YouTube is college.
Right?
There's nothing you can't learn on YouTube these days. So if there's something that you're wanting, there's ways to pay for it and to learn
Yep.
it, and there's ways to get it for free. So take that step to educate yourself, and I mean, go download the tools. Go down, like, if you want to be a music producer, go get the free version of Ableton. Go buy a MIDI keyboard. Almost any MIDI keyboard you buy these days comes with the Ableton Lite, which is their $100 version. Get
Yeah.
the software, learn it, learn how to use it. If you want to be a video editor, download DaVinci. You can go to Blackmagic's website right now and download it. It's free.
100%,
And it
man.
has almost all the features you need. You don't need the paid version of DaVinci to get started. You may get to a point where creatively you need to pay for DaVinci, but for the majority of users that are just starting out, the free version of DaVinci has everything you need, including a DAW. So if you want to be a music producer, go download DaVinci. You can do it there too, right?
That's
So
right.
I think it's just, yeah, take those first steps to get started. And yeah, there's plenty to go. There's plenty of places to go from that first step, but take the first step.
I love that, man. Well, where can people go to find out more about you and what you do?
I mean, LinkedIn's probably the easiest way to find me. We're the startup that I'm working with. We're in the kind of the beta phase of our software. So you can go to syncstudio.live and sign up for a beta. If you're a musician or even a podcaster, anything where you need to collaborate with audio remotely, that's kind of the audience we're targeting with our software, doing some pretty cool stuff in that space. We have some videos that we're working on right now that may or may not be out by the time this releases. Kind of telling the story of how our software works and what we did at South by Southwest this year. So pretty excited about that. So yeah, LinkedIn, syncstudio.live. Those are the best places to look at what I'm doing.